Welcome to Because Growth Matters. I'm Daniel Robus, your host. And today we are so privileged to have two of my favorite humans in the studio, founders and leaders of Growth Matters, Tony Cross and Alan Versteeg. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for giving us a little bit of time. I am going to dive into who you are and where you've been. So Tony, just to put you on the spot, if you had to introduce Alan, what would you say?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I've known Alan for many years, and what Alan is as a human is exactly the same as what you would expect in a business partner, if that makes any sense. So we've been working together for 12 or 13 years now, and Alan wears his heart on his sleeve. Is very emotional, very connected, very passionate, very empathetic, and really trying to bring out the best in others. Great storyteller, an amazing presenter. It really inspires people if you listen to Alan speaking, and occasionally he knows what he's talking about.
We have a book of Alanisms that we pass around. Hey, Alanisms. Thank you, Tony. Alan, if you had to introduce Tony into a dinner club, what would you say? Who is Tony?
Tony is a co-founder of Growth Matters. He is a pragmatic thinker. I've worked with him. We've got a really good shorthand. Tony has an ability to compartmentalize, put everything where it belongs, get you out of your panic mode, get things moving forward. And through that, he's able to get leaders and managers to really step out of their noise and understand what they need to do. By doing that, it drives his vision. Tony was the founder of the name Growth Matters because growth matters. And he realized that if we're focusing on that, then everything else takes care of itself. So I've been blessed to work with Tony all this time. We are different, but we complement each other. So looking forward to this chat.
Oh, that's so good. Just for our listeners that are joining us from overseas, they might not know the situations and where we live. Al, you moved out of the big smoke of Johannesburg and you live in a seaside village now. Describe your walk to get a coffee in the morning. Where do you stay and how do you stay connected?
Yeah, 500 meters from the beach, a beautiful 180-degree sea view of the Indian Ocean. It is now pretty much the middle of winter here, and we're in a 24 degrees Celsius. So we have a good tropical climate, and I am 12 minutes from the airport. So it's a convenient place to live.
And that's, servicing big organizations means you spend a little bit of time on a plane. We're going to dive into that in a couple of minutes. But Tony, you took it to the next step. Where do you stay?
I'm fortunate and blessed to be living on a small island called Mauritius in the Indian Ocean. I'm probably 200 meters away from the beach. But on the other hand, I'm 1.5 hours away from the nearest airport.
There's a theme that's going on here, and that's airport proximity is important to you. It was quite a step to go from being in person to being virtual, which you took during COVID and really exploded the business. How important is it to you to be accessible to customers now, Tony?
Look, it is important. The world has changed, as you mentioned. The pandemic, in a way, brought forward some of our vision and our ambition, because people moved to virtual. So you could run a session from a little island in the Indian Ocean or a little town on the east coast of South Africa. So that's possible. In fact, today I'm in London. So, running a session in London is the same. It could be in the US, it could be in Australia. But customers certainly do want that face-to-face from time to time. So being accessible, being able to jump on an airplane like Alan and I did last year, a 40-hour commute to Salt Lake City for a one-day meeting. But then when you're returning, you realize that collaboration could not have taken place over, 3 or 4 virtual sessions. Whiteboarding, being face-to-face, eye-to-eye with a customer was amazing. And what we achieved in that one day probably would have taken us a few weeks if it was just virtual.
Al, we've spoken about whiteboarding with customers. You've changed the way you personally look at sales management, or companies look at sales management. What's the most fulfilling part of that journey? And maybe you can take us back a step. What is the true north of Growth Matters?
I mean, if you think about the concept of because growth matters, we're obviously focused on the key areas of sales management. We believe that without investment in sales managers, no amount of training, no amount of consulting, no amount of enablement has any sustainable impact on the sales results, period. If you want to drive growth in sales, you've got to do that through your middle management layer of your sales managers. But then you've got to be pragmatic about it. You've got to give them the disciplines they need to get the number, execute their strategy, do that through their people, not for their people, and then drive client value or customer value as a result of that. And that's really been our focus. Our true north is we want to influence 1 million people in the profession of sales. The highest leverage mechanism to do that is by developing sales managers. And my perspective is the job of a sales manager is not to grow sales. It is to grow salespeople to grow sales. And by leveraging the sales managers, we can drive a massive influence in the profession of sales through Growth Matters.
That can get tough every now and then when people want to go and train their salespeople, because that's going to cure all ills. And I think the three of us sit on the same page that that's a Band-Aid over a gushing wound. Running a global business comes with immense highs and lows. What have been some of the most defining moments as leaders and founders here, Tony?
Dan, it's tough for sure. I mean, you're right. There are many highs, but there are certainly many lows. And for anyone who says it's quite easy, this is a glamorous life, you're always on airplanes flying off to exotic places, that may be true, but it's also very tough. Defining moments for me personally, winning big deals. We've won substantial size organizations, large brands. When you get that green light, when you get that yes, that's amazing. They're defining moments because they could be potentially 3 to 5 year engagements. So those are always massive. And then taking on employees. Alan and I often joke, and we said when we started out, we said, wow, let's do this on our own because managing people is tough and taking on employees is difficult. But we take it seriously. Every new employee is an important person in our family, if you like, in our business. So I would say that that's a defining moment for sure each time we take on an employee.
Al, what's the most surprising thing about running a global business?
I think the most surprising thing is the assumption everyone has about the uniqueness of the challenges and the uniqueness of the challenges in their segment, their sector, their territory. And the reality is that the challenges are very similar. At a high level, the rate of technology accelerated. We moved from managing salespeople in field to moving behind the mouse. And as a result, we're drowning in data but starved of insights. And no matter where you go, no matter what industry across the globe, and I think we've covered probably turning around about 52 countries. Yes, there are cultural differences, but the key challenges remain the same and the key frustrations remain the same. So I found that probably what surprised me in terms of I thought I'd see greater diversity in the challenges, but a lot of them are common across industry, brand, and country.
Al, I'm going to stay with you. If we go into a company and you work with the company, what fundamentally changes when they work with GMI? What do you think are the levers that you pull?
Well, the number one thing that changes is the assumption that we can manage time, which we can't. We can only manage trade-offs. To manage trade-offs, we have to prioritize our impact. To prioritize our impact, we have to know where our impact comes from. So the first thing that changes is a clarity around what the job of a sales manager is, which is to get the number by executing the strategy through the people to drive customer value. And you see, it's not lack of time, it's lack of direction. When you know what your true north is, then you can make the right trade-offs. You're going to drive the greatest impact. Once that's in place, then you've got to make sure you're simplifying the noise to the frontline salespeople. You're holding people accountable through a good culture. So we say focus on the soil, not the seeds. And then you've got to have a good pipeline. You've got to have a good sales plan. You've got to have drive deal success. You've got to be coaching people, developing people, managing people. So all of those areas will shift. But it starts by how you invest your time. And the key point is the first thing you want to do is get your house in order, simplify the noise, build a culture of accountability. And those are the quick wins we see when we go through what we call season one and start to change the culture of sales management in an organization.
Wow, that's really succinct, and it seems to be such a nice logical line that people can walk along. I'm sure that it's not as easy as it seems, but it is linear that we can go through it. How many sales managers and leaders have you taught over the year, Tony? And then added onto that, what habit consistently stands out amongst the best of them?
I'm not exactly sure of the precise number, Dan, but we're talking about over 3,000 sales managers or sales leaders across the globe. Many more we've impacted through things like the podcasts and things like the Global Connect sessions that we've run virtually over the years. Probably we've graduated now over 2,500 managers, and there's many more on the current programs. So we believe we're making an impact. Also, we believe there's much more work to be done. In terms of the top performing managers, what are the habits that they instill? The one would be definitely the ability to do what matters, to drive that impact. As Alan mentioned, they have to prioritize their impact. And where does their impact come from? It comes from those four areas that Alan spoke about. If they, for example, are not getting the number, they don't have the breathing space, to do all of the good things they need to do. If they are not working with their people and making the deals through their people, not for their people, then it's not a scalable solution. If they're not executing the strategy, then they're not really enabling the organization to go where the organizations need to go. And then if they're not driving customer value, well, we all know the challenges there. We have to be driving this lifelong value of a customer. So I would say the number one habit is they are very almost myopic to say that is my role. And often we see the mistake that sales leaders make is they take on everything else. They're doing things that are not core to their function. As our good friend Mike Weinberg will say, the organizations drown them in noise. And then they're not doing, for example, the coaching they need to be doing. So I would say they're very good at staying focused and maybe compartmentalizing. This is what I need to be doing. All the rest is just noise.
But surely they should be selling.
Well, that's always an interesting thing, Dan. And I can't give a sweeping statement that says a sales manager never should be selling, because there are occasions when they should be, when perhaps there's a gap in their sales team. But in general, they shouldn't. We don't believe they should be selling, because the two roles are fundamentally different. If you're an individual contributor, your mindset is different to if you're getting results through others. And again, we always say, sales managers need to be coaching people, not selling for their people. So again, not a sweeping statement, but certainly our preference is managers are leading others. Sales professionals are doing the selling work.
Nice. Alan, you're a voracious reader, and a lot of the content that's out here, you've created yourself. You must have a couple of icons in the industry and in education that you look up to. If you could have one person for an hour-long interview, living or past, who would it be and why?
It would be my grandmother, because she was an English teacher. She had an ability and command of the English language. She had a wonderful cadence. I get very excited, very passionate, and very motivated when I speak about this topic. And as a result, I can lose the cadence. People could struggle with my accent. If I've been told to slow down 1,000,000 times, that's a few times. So I'd love to just sit with my grandmother. She could speak to me about the power of cadence and pretty much coach me in that space. There are a lot of great leaders. Probably my favorite thinker, Peter Drucker. I think we've lost a lot of the principles of Peter Drucker that are just fundamental to management. But definitely my grandmother was the English teacher, Violet. And she could just say, Al, let me teach you how to carry cadence.
I think there's something so wonderful about learning from the people around us. And just to honor both of you, you're both so open to learning, and you take that learning on and you extend it so that you can benefit others. I've seen it personally and I've experienced it. I want to thank you for that, because it adds a richness to the content. You guys have spent years in rooms with sales teams and leaders. When they first get to know you, what is the mistake that you want to point out, but they've got to go through, Tony? They've got to get it in order to grow. What is that one thing that we're seeing it again?
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of things, Dan, and I mean, I spoke about the two different roles. So if you have a new sales manager who was a great salesperson, a great sales professional, it takes a while to adapt. Just be like me. Come on, can't you guys just be like me? I was successful. I know what we're doing. And that leads to poor coaching. So often when we know what the answer is, we don't lead the person to the answer. It's much quicker to just tell them what to do. So Dan, I need you to do this. Dan, if you want to move this deal forward, you really should have a relationship here. And then we don't end up coaching. We argue that 50% of the amount of hours that a manager has should be put into coaching. Now that's a lot. And we talk about there's 9 coaching conversations that a sales manager, could or should be doing, different conversations for different people. But if they're not spending enough time coaching, they're missing the biggest lever. So I would say that's one of the early lessons that throughout the journey of our core program, we're talking early, we're talking often, we're always mentioning this importance and power of coaching. So that off the top of my head, that would be probably the toughest challenge in some ways, because it is a mindset thing. We talk about AI coaching, and there's many new innovations around coaching, but we really need to be doing more coaching as sales managers.
But it's so hard because none of us have been on coaching courses. I'm a sales manager. I'm there to get the number. What is the message to this person on day one if they come in front of you regarding coaching?
I mean, the irony is you got to start with the data. I mean, the data is quite clear. The number one influence you can have in terms of the sales number is one-on-one coaching that is intentional and structured. That's not a maybe. That's not a debate. No one's confused about that. The challenge is, we did a white paper, and the resounding outcome was it's spoken about by all leaders as critical, yet it's the first meeting cancelled and the last metric measured. Organizations are not paying, kind of kudos to how critical coaching is. So for organizational leadership, you've got to bake this into the DNA of your business. You've got to make this part of your operating cadence. You've got to develop your people in order to coach. You've got to make sure that we're getting strong at this, because the data is clear. This is the big differentiator. The challenge is many organizations think they're coaching, when in actual fact they're not. They're mentoring, they're counseling, they're teaching, they're firefighting, but they're not coaching. They're not allowing people to think. Because coaching is a questioning skill that guides people to their own thinking. It's helping them learn rather than teach them. And because we're so impatient, because there's so much pressure on the number, we go for the efficiency play, which is let's tell them what to do, not realizing we're robbing them of their growth and their thinking. And as a result, we're in Groundhog Day, saying the same things over and over again, not developing people. Let me repeat it, Dan. Your job of a sales manager is not to grow sales. It is to grow salespeople who grow sales. And coaching is the number one fertilizer you can use to grow that seed.
So I want to carry on there. We've just come out of a bumper crop from a sales perspective. People were placing orders. We've got order takers everywhere, and we are entering into a sparse environment. We can see it geopolitically. Everything's a little bit up in the air, and prospecting seems to be very cool at the moment. What is the thought now? Is that the best thing a sales leader can do now, is to coach them through prospecting? Is that the new flavor of the month? Or how do we deal with this pending drought?
I think you can't look at a single discipline. So prospecting is definitely an area. The reality is, there's a great term used by Mark Weinberg, so proactive sales calling. I look at this differently. I don't think it should be seasonal. Prospecting should be part of what we do as sales professionals. And I'll tell you why. If you have complete conviction in the value your product or services bring to the market, it would be negligent not to have a practice of making that market aware. The tendency, Dan, is to find the easy route. Let's do mass outreaches. Let's do LinkedIn mails. We're not connecting with people around value. And the reality is, perhaps if we'd invented the telephone after email and LinkedIn, we'd all be phoning each other.
Tony, the SMDP, the Sales Management Development Program, which is a 12-month MBA-style intervention, that's your brainchild between yourself and Alan. What transformation do you most love witnessing as sales managers go through this journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a saying, sales management is the toughest job in the world. And if you feel that way, and if that's your mindset, then you're not going to really be great at it. It's true. Of course, it's true. It's a really tough role. But once you start to unlock the potential in others, you start to go, and it's the most rewarding job in the world. And when that happens in a class, when that happens over the journey of 12 months, where people go, I can unlock the potential in in a family tree. I can unlock Daniel's potential, but Daniel has a family and Daniel has dependents. I'm going to make a significant change in this person's life. When we're doing one-on-one coaching, because we support the managers with one-on-one coaching throughout the journey, and it's tough. It can be 4 o'clock in the morning. It can be 9 o'clock at night. We're doing a coaching session. But when you come off the coaching session and the people tell you, wow, that gives me such clarity. That was amazing. Thank you for the help. You can only feel grateful that we have this opportunity to help others. And the same thing happens with the managers on the journey, is once they start to realize their job is getting results through others, and they really grasp that, then all of the tools and the training and the enablement and the support and really is unlocked. They can use that potential because Alan also talks about how do you scale a sales team? You might have 2 or 3 great salespeople, but imagine if you had 7 or 8 really good salespeople in your team, and that is your mission as a sales manager, and the results follow. Once you start implementing the disciplines, and we talk about 9 critical disciplines, once that starts to happen, the results follow. You need to do the hard work, the disciplines first, the great habits. And as I say, the results then follow.
Al, I saw you nodding there. Would you answer it the same way, or do you have a different spin on that?
Fundamentally, I would. I think the one thing I want to add is I talk about we're human beings, not human doings, is the reward we get of the impact you then have in the personal lives, as Tony said. I can't tell you the amount of times I get a text message or an email or a conversation at a conference and they go, hey, Al, I just need to speak to you about how you changed my life. And it's highly rewarding. But also many times when managers share that, it's because they've gotten that feedback from the people they're coaching, developing, and supporting. And that's the power of a growth mindset, because growth matters. And when we focus on that, we focus on the growth of the individual, amazing things happen. I always like to say that the honeybee follows the discipline of collecting pollen for the hive and doesn't know it's keeping the planet alive. And so often we don't realize, as we continue to create value through developing our people, that they create value in the market, and that creates value for the shareholders. They're not mutually exclusive. Developing people is the primary role of a sales manager.
Sure, I like that. Alan, classroom, coaching, or boardroom? Where's your happy space?
My happy space is talking. So, ironically, I find for me where I'm most passionate is in the classroom, where I'm most persuasive is in the boardroom, and where I'm most personal is in the coaching. And I think they're different. So they all matter to me, but they're different places. I like the persuasion, the sale in the boardroom. I like the passion of delivering learning to people in the classroom. But I like that personal learning that people get through coaching, but and watching them get those aha moments. So different scenarios and different payoffs, Dan.
Cool. Tony, you've spent years now teaching. What has this taught you about yourself?
I was going to say that bees are important, but Alan's already said that. In reality, Dan, it's been quite a surprising journey for me because, if you had asked me the same question, I would probably say the boardroom. I really enjoy speaking to senior leaders about strategy and topics like that. But in terms of the teaching side, I was not a natural teacher, and I've learned lots from Alan and others. It's been enjoyable. It surprised myself in terms of being able to stand up in front of 30, 60 people and, talk to them about a concept. I really enjoy whiteboarding. So if there's not a whiteboard or a flip chart, then I'm a little bit lost in the classroom because I like to be having those sidebar conversations and whiteboarding. And then in the coaching, I find the coaching emotionally draining because you're putting, energy into this person and you really, you have to really concentrate on what they're saying and, how you're coaching them. And that was a little bit surprising. I thought maybe coaching was this, fairly easy thing you could do. So a few lessons I've learned throughout this journey, Dan.
You've now come up with the concept of the chalk and talk. What is a chalk and talk? Just because you love flipboards and whiteboards and pens, tell us a little bit about a chalk and talk.
Dan, there's so many virtual, connects that we're all on. We're all on these virtual sessions, these webinars, and so on, and they're great. but we're trying to make a small return back to the in-person environment. So after a busy day at work, let's meet up. Let's, have a drink or have a snack, and let's talk about the challenges that are in sales. Let's talk about how do you manage a pipeline. Let's talk about how you can grow an exponential outcome in your sales team. And then the chalk and talk was an idea that, well, let's talk around a flip chart. Let's not have a PowerPoint presentation. In fact, there's not even a screen or a laptop. Let's just talk about the challenges and see if we can, in 90 minutes or 120 minutes, see if we can help people walk away with one or two things that they can go and apply, tomorrow in the worlds and in the challenges that they live in.
And you running those in London, Al? I think you're going to Australia to run one or two of them. Where are you going to be running that in Adelaide?
We're running Melbourne. I think it's around about the 24th.
Okay. And then plans to go to the States or anything? You're going to go where the customers need us?
Well, effectively, Dan, I think what we wanted to do is if we're in territory, let's add value to the community we want to influence. That's really the intent. So next time, if we're going to be in Salt Lake City for a day, we'll stay an extra day and meet up with some sales leaders in the territory and literally just invite them for some canapes, some drinks, and let's just talk about this profession of sales and sales management. And that's the intention behind it. How do we invest back into the community that we desperately are focused on influencing based on where we are in the world? I think between Tony last year and me, we both did more than 52 flights. So it's a lot of places to be. But when you're there, let's go and invest in that community. And as Tony said, in person, pressing the flesh, chalk and talk. Let's just tackle some challenges in sales and sales management.
Yeah, I mean, Dan, if I could just add on to that, Alan mentioned the one in Melbourne that's coming up the 24th of July. When this podcast airs, that will probably be in the past, but we're going to be running these continuously. So, Alan spoke about if we're in territory, let's run one of these sessions. I'm doing some work in India this year, and I have probably 2 or 3 opportunities to be in Bangalore. So, let's get a group of people together. And it doesn't need to be 50, 100, a million people. It can be at our first Chalk and Talk, I think we had, outside of friends and family, we probably had 11 or 12 people. But the conversations were robust, and people left saying, I want to come to the next one. When are you back in London in this case? And then we certainly want to be running them in some of the cities in the US.
Just a segue in, if you are looking for a Chalk and Talk in your city, go onto the Growth Matters website, ping us an email, or Tony and Alan are pretty active on LinkedIn as well. Get hold of them on LinkedIn and you can pop it through and make a request and we can see what we can do. That'll be outstanding. Thank you, Tony. That's a great reminder. We're coming to an end here. I'm going to start wrapping up a little bit, but I'd like to ask Tony, if you were interviewing Alan, what would you have asked him?
I would probably ask him that, what he would foresee as the biggest challenges would be over the next decade, because we've been doing this for longer than 10 years. What does he think the biggest challenges we're going to have in scaling this global business of ours?
Okay, so it's a business question. It's not an industry question. Al, you've been going for more than 10 years now. What are the biggest challenges you see scaling over the next 10 years?
There's a great quote from Dan Martell. You cannot scale yourself. You can only scale your standards. And, we don't rise to our goals, we fall to our standards. So the big thing we want to focus on is how do we consistently drive those standards so we're not building a business on scaffolding, but on a solid foundation of standards. And the key thing in it is often practicing what we teach. And it's exactly what we're trying to do with sales managers. If you operate at this standard, if you practice these disciplines, a lot of the noise and challenges and frustrations of trying to achieve something go away. People always say it's hard, and I go, I don't like the word. I like the fact that it's tough, because tough is something you can face. It could be simple. Coaching is simple. It's a model we teach. It's called ICE. It's a simple thing to do. You just have to be curious and patient. What's tough is that you have to be curious and patient. What's simple is the process. So that for me is the key thing that I would be sharing.
Awesome. If you were interviewing Tony, what would your question be for him?
Tony, a whole bunch of things fill your day. Some of them are things you hate to do. Some of things are meh. You can get them done because you're skilled. What lights you up, Tony? Where does your flow come from?
Great question. Tony, where does your flow come from?
I think solving complex problems is certainly something that does light me up. So, being able to have the time and the space to really think about a challenge and then come up with a solution, that lights me up.
If no one's seen you in front of a chalk and talk or a whiteboard, you'll watch Tony in flow for sure. He is then lit up as he solves those complex problems, compartmentalizes them, as I said earlier. I definitely got to second that one. You got to see Tony with a marker in hand.
Yeah, I mean, there's many other things. So, I've started this process of one-on-ones with the staff, and it's dedicated time, but what I'm learning is huge. So I'm learning to connect with people as individuals, understand their particular pressures and friction points and so on, and then feed that back into the business. And what we're trying to do is trying to then improve it through things, Alan mentioned the standards and the culture and our values. So it's an ongoing journey. I guess sometimes we're hard on ourselves, but other times it's worth celebrating. We've been successful. We've come through COVID. We're a business that's longer than 10 years. Many businesses don't make it that far. And we're driving huge impact. It could be that one email that you get from someone who, tells Alan, you've changed my life. You've saved me from myself. Sometimes the comments are. You've reconnected me with the passion of leading others in sales management. Those moments are massive. And sometimes we don't pause and go, oh, let's just breathe and go, wow, look at that difference we made in that person's life.
Celebrate the wins. Celebrate the wins. Tony, I'm going to ask 2 more questions of you, and then I'm going to let you guys carry on with your day. Thank you for being so open and vulnerable, both of you. The first one is quite a slam dunk. I think we're there, but what do you think sales leaders should do more of or less of going forward?
That is simple. They should do less of what's not driving impact. So all of those things that are put on their desk that don't really belong to them, and they should do more coaching.
Al, I'm not going to ask you the same question because I think the 3 of us agree in this. What are you most excited about from a lockstep in the art and the profession of sales management in the next 5 years? What do you think's on the horizon for us?
For me, I'm going to be negligent not to speak about AI. I think AI is going to remove a lot of the mundane tasks that we do fulfill. It's then going to highlight that now you've got all the spare time, what are you doing with it? And if you can't, as a sales professional, create and communicate value, and if you can't, as a sales manager, grow and develop people, you're going to found wanting. So the lockstep is going to be the ability to really see the demand for those softer skills in terms of what differentiates us as human beings.
So this ability to create accountability, to manage expectations, and to be consistent on our coaching is really going to be a superpower for a sales manager going forward. I really like that. Tony, what are you looking forward to in season 1 of this Growth Matters podcast, because growth matters?
Dan, it'll be the people. So I know you have a really incredible lineup of interesting people, ranging from people that specialize in sales management, someone like Mike Weinberg, for example. He's always interesting to listen to, all the way through to, former sports stars that you're going to be speaking to about the concept of growth, whether that's personal growth or sales growth or leadership growth. So I think it's not going to be the same every episode. So I'm really looking forward to that variety and all of those interesting people you're going to be speaking to.
Awesome. Alan, I think my coup de grace is going to be for you. For a CRO who's never going to work with Growth Matters, for this person, it's just listening to the podcast because their partner told them they had to, but they're not going to engage with you. What's the 1% thing that will move their business to the next level from a sales management perspective, apart from coaching, that you would suggest they get in place?
Get an objective view of your deals by scoring their closability and coach those gaps to drive momentum in your deals. We are caught up in a whole bunch of mundane, irrelevant, auditing-based, inspection-based conversations around deals. The whole deal is why we exist, which is to create value and accelerate customer value realization. So what we've got to do is we've first got to get subjective about that. We want to understand, is this a genuine opportunity? Is our solution relevant? What are their options? Who do we need to influence? What's the timing? How will it be funded? Let's understand that. And then in those gaps, let's coach our sales professionals to figure out ways to close those gaps. Because in closing that gap, if you forget about your forecast, you forget about your pipeline, you even forget about your number, by doing that, you're moving value into the market. But as long as we're caught up in auditing these deals, we say we're customer-centric, but we're not being customer-centric. If I'm a CRO, I'm going, get in control of your deals, understand what's going on, coach them to success.
There's a whole podcast there. Alan, thank you. That was amazing. Because growth matters rolls off your tongue so easily, but I really see what we're doing, changing lives, and I'm so excited that you two are at the helm. Thank you for being on the podcast. Thank you for giving us a little bit of time. People can get hold of you on the website. They can get hold of you on LinkedIn. Is there any reading, Tony, that we need to do until we talk again? What would you recommend that we take away that's going to make us grow?
Yeah, I mean, there's many great books, as you know, Dan, and, Ellen reads all the time. I'm reading, you're reading. So it's important to be reading something. As sales managers, as sales leaders out there, you need to be reading all the time. There's great podcasts, there's great TED Talks, there's many things you can be doing. The Next 5 Moves. It's such an amazing book. Books on communication, books on persuasion, books on psychology, any of Mike Weinberg's books. There's many, many books that you can be reading out there. It's not hard to find a great book. My top advice would be, if you're reading a book and it's not resonating with you, you don't have to finish till the end. Put that down. There's another book waiting for you.
Oh, I love that. Don't do things just because you're expected to do it. Do it for the right reasons. Thank you, gentlemen. This is Daniel from Because Growth Matters saying thank you for the last time to both Alan and Tony, founders and C-levels at Growth Matters. Before you jet off, one's in London, one's in Bolito. Hopefully you have a wonderful remainder of the week and we get to see you soon. From me, Daniel, goodbye. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Because Growth Matters. If you got value from today's conversation, please take a moment to rate the show 5 stars on your listening platform and share it with someone who might benefit as well. Don't forget to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. Catch you next week.